All right, so let's talk about something that affects almost everyone at some point in their lives: debt. It's a word that can sound intimidating, maybe even a little bit scary. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be. Welcome to our deep dive into the world of debt. Today, we'll break down everything you need to know about borrowing money, from key features to different types and examples. My goal here isn't to tell you debt is always good or always bad, because frankly, it's more nuanced than that. Instead, I want to equip you with the knowledge to understand it, manage it, and maybe even use it to your advantage. Think of this video as your ultimate guide, your financial compass for navigating the often confusing waters of borrowing. We're going to strip away the jargon, get straight to the point, and give you actionable insights. Whether you're thinking about a student loan, a mortgage, a car loan, or just trying to get a handle on your credit cards, understanding the fundamentals is absolutely key. Because when you understand how debt works, you're in a much better position to make smart financial decisions that will benefit you in the long run. And that's what we're all about here. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. We're going to cover everything from the basic building blocks like principal and interest, all the way to the differences between good debt and bad debt, and the pros and cons you need to consider. By the end of this, you'll have a much clearer picture, and hopefully feel a lot more confident when it comes to your own financial journey. Let's smash that like button if you're ready to learn something new, and let's begin. All right, first up, let's talk about the principal. This is a super important term you absolutely need to get. Simply put, the principal is the original amount of money that you borrow from a lender. It's the starting point, the base amount before any interest or fees are added on top. So, if you take out a $10,000 car loan, that $10,000 is your principal. If you get a $300,000 mortgage to buy a house, that $300,000 is the principal. It's the cold, hard cash you're actually receiving and are responsible for paying back. Understanding this is crucial because everything else, especially interest, is often calculated based on this initial sum. Think of the principal as the foundation of your loan agreement. Without it, there's no loan, right? It's the core obligation. When you make payments, a portion of that payment will typically go towards reducing this principal amount, and another portion will go towards paying off the interest, which we'll get into next. The faster you can pay down your principal, generally, the less interest you'll pay over the life of the loan. So, always be clear on exactly what that principal amount is before you sign on any dotted line. It's the number one thing to identify. Okay, so we've got the principal down. Now let's talk about its very close companion interest. If the principal is what you borrow, interest is essentially the fee you pay for the privilege of borrowing that money. Lenders aren't just handing out cash for fun. They're in the business of making money, and interest is how they do it. It's usually expressed as an annual percentage rate, or APR, of the outstanding principal balance. So a 5% interest rate on that $10,000 car loan means you're paying 5% per year on the money you still owe. This is why a loan always ends up costing you more than the initial amount you borrowed. The thing about interest is that it can work for you or against you massively. When you're borrowing, it's working against you, adding to your total repayment. The higher the interest rate and the longer the loan term, the more interest you'll end up paying. This is where things can get a bit tricky, with concepts like compound interest, but for now, just remember that interest is the cost of using someone else's money. Always shop around for the best interest rates, because even a small difference can save you a significant amount of cash over time. It's the price tag of your loan, so pay very close attention to it. Next up in our debt deep dive is the term of the loan. This one's pretty straightforward. The term is simply the length of time you have to repay the debt in full. It could be a few months for a small personal loan, 5 years for a typical car loan, or even 30 years for a mortgage. So when you hear someone talk about a 15-year mortgage or a 60-month auto loan, they're referring to the term. This time frame is agreed upon when you take out the loan, and it dictates how long you'll be making those payments. It's a critical piece of the puzzle. Now, the term has a really big impact on a couple of things. Firstly, it affects the size of your regular payments. Generally, a shorter term means higher monthly payments because you're trying to pay back the same amount of money in less time. Conversely, a longer term will usually result in lower monthly payments, which might seem appealing. However, and this is a big however, a longer term often means you'll pay significantly more interest over the life of the loan, even if the interest rate is the same. So there's a trade-off. Lower payments now could mean a much higher total cost later. You have to balance what's manageable monthly with the total interest paid. Alright, so you've got your principal, your interest rate, and your loan term. Now, how does it all come together in terms of actually paying it back? That's where the repayment schedule comes in. This is the plan that outlines how and when your payments are due. For most common types of loans, like mortgages, auto loans, and personal loans, this usually means fixed monthly installments. You pay the same amount, on the same day, every month, until the loan is paid off. This predictability can be really helpful for budgeting your finances effectively each month. But not all repayment schedules are structured as simple monthly installments. Some loans, though less common for consumers, might have variable payments or even require a large lump sum payment at the end, known as a balloon payment. For things like credit cards, which we'll discuss more later, you have a minimum payment due, but the schedule is more flexible as long as you meet that minimum. The key takeaway here is to always understand your specific repayment schedule. Know the due dates, the amounts, and any penalties for late payments. Missing payments can seriously hurt your credit score and lead to extra fees, so staying on top of this is vital. Now let's get into different types of debt, starting with secured debt. This is a really important category to understand because it involves something called collateral. Secured debt is a loan that is backed by an asset you own. What does that mean? It means if for whatever reason you stop making payments and default on the loan, the lender has the legal right to take possession of that specific asset to recoup their losses. That asset is the security for the loan, hence the name. It gives the lender a safety net, reducing their risk. The most common examples of secured debt are mortgages and auto loans. When you take out a mortgage, the house itself is the collateral. If you don't pay your mortgage, the bank can foreclose on your home. Similarly, with a car loan, the car is the collateral. Miss too many payments and the lender can repossess your vehicle. Because there's collateral involved, secured loans often come with lower interest rates compared to unsecured loans. The lender feels more, secure, knowing they can get something back if you don't pay. But that also means you have a lot more to lose if you can't keep up with the payments. So, if secured debt is backed by an asset, what about unsecured debt? You guessed it. Unsecured debt is not backed by any collateral. When you take out an unsecured loan, you're borrowing money based purely on your creditworthiness and your promise to repay. The lender doesn't have a specific asset they can seize if you default. This means there's a higher risk for the lender. If you don't pay them back, they can't just come and take your TV or your couch, generally speaking. They'd have to pursue other legal avenues like suing you to try and recover the money. Because of this higher risk for lenders, unsecured debt typically comes with higher interest rates than secured debt. Lenders charge more to compensate for the lack of collateral. Common examples of unsecured debt include most credit cards, personal loans, sometimes called signature loans, and student loans. While there's no specific asset tied to these loans that can be immediately repossessed, defaulting on unsecured debt still has serious consequences. It can wreck your credit score, lead to collections agencies hounding you, and potentially result in wage garnishment if a lender successfully sues you. So don't take it lightly just because there's no collateral. Let's talk about a specific type of debt mechanism you're probably familiar with: revolving debt. The classic example here is a credit card, but lines of credit also fall into this category. With revolving debt, you're given a credit limit. Say $5,000 on a credit card. You can borrow money up to that limit, pay some or all of it back, and then borrow it again, over and over. It revolves. Unlike an installment loan where you get a lump sum and pay it off over a fixed term, revolving debt is more flexible. You decide how much of your available credit to use each month. This flexibility can be a double-edged sword, though. While it's convenient to have access to credit when you need it, it's also very easy to accumulate a lot of debt quickly if you're not careful. Credit cards, in particular, often come with very high interest rates, especially if you only make the minimum payments. That minimum payment is designed to keep you in debt for a long time, racking up interest charges for the credit card company. So, while revolving debt can be a useful tool for short-term financing or managing cash flow, it requires a lot of discipline to use responsibly and avoid falling into a debt trap. Now, let's contrast revolving debt with its more structured cousin installment debt. With installment debt, you borrow a specific fixed amount of money up front, and you agree to pay it back in regular, equal installments over a predetermined period. That's your loan term we talked about earlier. Think of mortgages, auto loans, and many personal loans. You know exactly how much your payment will be each month, and you know exactly when the loan will be fully paid off if you stick to the schedule. This predictability is one of the key features of installment debt. This fixed nature makes installment loans generally easier to budget for. You can plan your finances around these consistent payments. The interest rate on an installment loan is also typically fixed for the life of the loan, though variable rates exist for some, like certain mortgages. Each payment you make is usually split between paying down the principal and covering the interest. Over time, as you pay down the principal, a larger portion of your payment goes towards the principal and less towards interest. This is a very common and straightforward way to finance larger purchases, offering a clear path to becoming debt-free for that specific obligation. Alright, this is a big one. The concept of good debt versus bad debt. It's not always a black and white distinction, but it's a useful framework for thinking about borrowing. Generally speaking, good debt is defined as borrowing money for things that can increase your net worth or generate future income. Think of it as an investment. The classic examples include a mortgage for a primary residence, as property values historically tend to appreciate over the long term, or student loans to fund an education that could lead to a higher-paying career. Even business loans used to expand a profitable company could be considered good debt. On the flip side, bad debt is typically debt taken on to purchase depreciating assets or for consumption that doesn't provide any future financial return. High-interest credit card debt used to buy things like fancy clothes, expensive dinners, or a new TV that loses value the moment you buy it, that's usually considered bad debt. Payday loans with exorbitant interest rates are almost universally seen as bad debt. The main idea is that bad debt costs you money without offering a tangible financial benefit in return, and often comes with high interest rates that can quickly spiral out of control. The goal is usually to minimize bad debt and be strategic about any good debt you take on. So after breaking all of this down, it's clear that debt is a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Let's explicitly lay out some of the major pros and cons. On the pro side, debt allows you to make large purchases that you might not be able to afford up front, like a home or a car. It can be a tool for leverage. For example, businesses use debt to finance expansion, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, hopefully leading to greater profits. Responsibly managed debt, like making timely payments on loans and credit cards, can also help you build a positive credit history, which is crucial for your financial future if you want better rates on future loans. However, the cons can be pretty significant if debt isn't handled carefully. The most obvious one is the interest. You almost always end up paying back more than you borrowed, sometimes a lot more. If you struggle to make payments and default on a loan, it can severely damage your credit score, making future borrowing difficult and expensive. For secured debt, you risk losing the asset you put up as collateral, like your house or car. And let's be honest, having a lot of debt can lead to significant financial stress and anxiety, impacting your overall quality of life. It's all about finding that balance and using debt wisely, not letting it control you. All right, we've covered a ton of ground today. From the nitty-gritty of principal and interest to the different flavors of debt like secured, unsecured, revolving, and installment, and even the big question of good debt versus bad debt. My hope is that this breakdown has demystified the world of borrowing for you and given you a much clearer understanding of how it all works. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your finances. Debt isn't inherently evil, but it demands respect and careful management. The key is to be an informed borrower. Always read the fine print, understand the terms, and never borrow more than you can comfortably afford to repay. Think strategically about why you're taking on debt and whether it aligns with your long-term financial goals. Building good financial habits around debt can save you a lot of money and stress down the road and can even help you achieve some of your biggest life goals like owning a home or getting that degree. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more financial tips and insights. Seriously, smash that like button. It really helps the channel out. Have any questions about debt? Or maybe you have your own experiences or tips you want to share. Drop them in the comments below. I try to read as many as I can, and your questions might even inspire a future video. Until next time, manage your money wisely.